We were at Shrinemont at one point, and a lot of people were going halfway up that hill that so many of you know so well, and they were going to visit the labyrinth. And you say labyrinth, and a lot of people get all excited. Oh, I can't wait for the labyrinth. For those of you who aren't that familiar with it, it's like a maze, except you can't get lost. There's only one way in, one way out. And at the very end, you will end up at the center. And lots of people have done this as a mystical experience, a spiritual practice for centuries. And so all of these people were going up the hill, and one person came to me with a confession, not that sort of confession, we don't repeat that, but came to me with an admission as all these people were going off with smiles on their faces to walk the labyrinth. And they said to me, Father Sandy, I just think it's stupid. All that walking around, I get that the point of it, I get that you are on a journey with God and it takes twists and turns you don't expect. You think you're closer to the finish line, to the center, and then you're getting farther away. And sometimes the farther away is what actually gets you to the center. But I walk it and I think, how soon is this over? It's okay. It's not for everyone. There are all sorts of things in the church that aren't for everyone, at least not in the same way. One of my favorite things in the church to be is a vexillate. When's the last time you were a vexillate? That's the word for banner bearer, actually. If you carry the banner, you're a vexillate, unless you're a woman, and then you're a vexillatrix. Thank you very much. But you go to a diocesan convention or a fancy service, and you'll have banner bearers, vexillators and vexillatrices walking down the aisle. And some people say, oh, the pageantry, it's so fantastic, the pomp and circumstance, it's moving. And other people say, wow, that's a lot of nothing. Crucifers, they bear the cross. I follow them wherever they go. Theoretically, if they take a wrong turn and go out the door, I guess I'm going out the door too. That's a meaningful symbol for me, but not for everybody. The Bible. Some people take it as though it was an idol, and other people try to avoid it at all costs. There are also songs that are really meaningful to some people and not to others. I had a campus minister myself who ruined one such song for me. They'll know we're Christians by our love. You know that one that used to be at summer camps all the time? And they'll know we are Christians by our love. He used to sing that and many other songs with wrong words as we would do work together. And he used to sing, and you'll know you've been spit on when you're wet, when you're wet. And I can't hear that song without hearing him say that. With all the different things that it can be taken in different ways, that mean different things to different Christians, I don't think there's any larger discrepancy than that of how the church views Mary. How do you deal with Mary? Do you put her on a pedestal? Do you try to pretend she's not there unless it's Christmas? How does that work for you? Such a variety of responses to Mary throughout Christendom and even beyond. Lots of other religions have bits about Mary. There's actually an entire chapter in the Quran about Mary, believe it or not. And the image of Mary brings a smile to some people's faces, while it makes others kind of uncomfortable. In the Roman Catholic Church, there's a whole host of ways of Marian devotion, reinforced through the rosary, and it's been strong for centuries. As the church grew, Mary meant many different things to many different people. In the Eastern Orthodox tradition, they lift up the Theotokos, the bearer of God. And that remains important to people in icons, from ones entitled, She Who Leads to the Way, to the All-Merciful. So why, then, is Mary revered in some places and not in others? Some of the history goes back to the 4th century, where the church was trying to figure out a lot of stuff. They were trying to figure out who this Jesus fellow was, and eventually in their fight against Nestorianism, there'll be a quiz later, they decide that they have to actually, in saying things about Jesus, say things about Mary. Is Jesus 100% human, 100% divine, 50-50, 60-40, 70-30, depends on how I'm feeling on the day? Or maybe they thought, maybe he's born human and later on somehow becomes divine. Maybe the baptism, lots of like dove thing coming down. The theory is, of course, the theology is that Jesus is 100% human and 100% divine. Holy mystery of how that doesn't get to 200%. But it does mean that somehow in the womb he's God, which makes Mary the God-bearer, the Theotokos. So in the 4th century, they named her Theotokos because they're fighting this fight about who Jesus is or is not, and she comes to more prominence. Fast forward to the Reformation, and people said, this Mary stuff's gone too far. You're worshiping Mary. And worship is only okay for God alone. The Roman Catholic Church has always had the doctrine that Mary is venerated, adored, but not worshipped. But talk to the individual worshiper and they might have their own different version of it. During the Counter-Reformation, she sees a rise again. And she becomes really important as Christianity starts to go through the rest of the world, particularly in Latin America with visions there and in Asia. Mary becomes a very important figure again. But have you ever asked yourself why? Why does she symbolize this? Or what does she symbolize for such a variety of peoples? What does she symbolize for you? Here's this woman trying to figure out how to live life in a very difficult time in occupied territory, having a baby when she's not supposed to have a baby yet. Joseph, who does not leave her. Ultimately, she was the one who said the enormous and world-changing yes to God. The enormous and world-changing yes. Of course, to jump too quickly to venerating Mary is just like jumping too quickly to Christmas, to skip to the end of a finished story, rather than living into the one into which we are all called. Not so fast. We should be careful about celebrating what someone did as if it's over, especially if we take that to mean that there are no yeses left to be said. Because there are, and this is still Advent for a little while longer. Mary has had all sorts of fascinating titles over the years. Visions and titles have cropped up all over the world, and here are some of my favorites. If you have ever gone down to Disney World in a car from the airport in Orlando down there, one of the ways you go passes Mary, Queen of the Universe Shrine. It is an enormous complex, a little bizarre. Take your time going to that one. She's been called the Advocate of Eve, the cause of our salvation, the seat of wisdom. My personal favorite, Our Lady of Copacabana. That's a true one, and apparently Our Lady of Copacabana is the patron saint of the Bolivian Navy, which has no coast. Almost every country has a patron saint one way or another, and whoever decides these things has decided that the patron saint of the United States of America is one of the visions of Mary. In fact, every single state has one of the visions of Mary as its patron saint. Does anyone happen to know which one it is for Virginia? Our Lady, Queen of the Apostles, apparently, is the patron saint of Virginia. But the real question is, who is she for you? Another way, where is our yes? If that's what she's all about, where is our yes? Like Elizabeth meeting her, what leaps for joy inside of us? She goes on to meet that Elizabeth, and at hearing her voice, Elizabeth proclaims, "Wow, Why are you so important, visiting me so lowly? Because at the voice of you, the baby inside me went bonkers. Mary, and to an extent Elizabeth and later John, are us in the story. People explain away Jesus. I can't be like Jesus because Jesus is God. He's got all that divine stuff going on. Who am I to try to emulate Jesus? I can't do that. Although the very council that raises up Mary speaks against that, that's another story. I understand. But Mary, Elizabeth, and John, they're us. Sometimes I wonder if the desire to glorify them is really just a ploy in order that we might have that vision of humanity reassuringly out of reach. I don't have to say that big of a yes ever in my life because Mary's already done it. Whenever we make a saint too high of a saint, we lift up humanity beyond our own reach. I'm just me. Who am I to say yes? Who am I to be called? Who am I to live into any sort of big life like that? But that's actually what humanity is. I'm tired of everyone, and even myself, saying, "Oh, I'm only human." Actually, that's a pretty impressive thing to be. We are made in the image of God. When we do our most amazing things, that's when we're being human. When we do anything else, we are being less than human. When something does something fantastic, they're not being superhuman, they're actually being human. Don't be too quick to venerate that which has already happened. Because the two worst things you can do are similar to the two worst things you can do to a former rector or priest. The two worst things you can do to a former rector is canonize them and demonize them. If you demonize the former rector, you decide that all of the bad things that have ever happened in this parish was due to that nut job. Can't possibly be our fault, and then we don't have any stuff to work on ourselves. Works for the workplace too, by the way. If you demonize the person who was left, everything bad that's ever happened isn't your fault. Everything will be just fine, thank you very much, and you'll never deal with the stuff that you actually have to deal with. If you canonize the former boss or rector, then everything good that ever happened belongs to that person, and there's no good in you. Don't be too quick to demonize or canonize Mary or any other saint just like that. In the icon, She Who Guides, she is the icon pointing to Jesus on her lap. The first one, like John years later, to direct our attention to Christ as if saying, hey, pay attention. This is the one to listen to. As the seat of wisdom, she is almost like a throne, the place of abiding for Jesus as he goes about his work on earth. Again, we should be careful about celebrating what someone did, especially if we take that to mean that no yeses are left to be said. Our yeses, big and small, are all significant because they all, in their own small way, make us God-bearers as well. See, God is intervening in this world, and Mary, for one, proclaims it boldly. It is Advent. God is coming. And I know this because God said so. It is Advent. God is coming. And I know this because I said yes. It is Advent. God is coming. And I believe God's promises about how the world is meant to be will all come true. I will bear that light to others, and I will be joyous when they bring it to me. We only have a little while left in our Advent preparations. Set aside your burdens and notice what leaps for joy inside of you as our Redeemer approaches. And say yes. not just to his arrival as a babe in arms, not even just as a Savior one day returning in glory, but look for him, as the collect today says, in his daily visitation, that he might find in us a mansion prepared for himself. It is not enough for the vexillate to bear the standard. It is not enough for the crucifer to bear the cross. And it is not enough for the Scripture to bear witness. All of that is for us to do. And it is not enough for Mary to bear God, for it is for us to bear God as well. Blessed are you, God-bearer. Something unexpectedly leaps for joy inside of me because of the God you bring here.